Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Airspeed's Avatar Rewatch video. This one's going to be for Book 2 Earth Episode 12, The Serpents Pass, or to give it its full title, it's considered to be part of a kind of two-part special called The Journey to Ba Sing Se, and this is the first part, The Serpents Pass. This one's animated by JM Animation, and yeah, another really good episode, and it really serves to highlight what Book 2 has done differently than Book 1, and that is having additional plot points kind of constantly pop up in the middle of a season, in that you have this overall goal, and now you're adding all these other layers on board. Like, they go from Aang has just learned earthbending to library, discovering the eclipse, we've got to get to Ba Sing Se because of that, but Appa's gone missing, we have to get him back, and now here's even more reason to go to Ba Sing Se with the drill at the end, and you know, that's just the main plot point stuff. That's not even mentioning, you know, a lot of the kind of character focused stuff in this episode, and then what they do with Zuko and Iroh as well. So, you know, there's a lot to this episode, and I absolutely understand why, you know, in the marketing, they did initially hype this up as a kind of two-parter thing of just like, Ba Sing Se is a big place, it's a place you should be excited to see them eventually get to. And there's actually a story about the journey to get there. It's really interesting because obviously Book 1, the main plot was to get to a specific location. The Northern Water Tribe took the whole book. We didn't really have a side plot along the way. And here it's actually really nice to see that they just have like a proper like multi-part kind of group of episodes here, and that you can always like really turn it into like a four-parter or something like that, really, that like the library, the desert, the Serpents Pass, and the drill all make up this kind of journey to Ba Sing Se, because it really feels like this is where that whole arc really kicks off. Like, the library really does start a chain of a lot of very interesting things happening. But we start off with a very interesting kind of lore implication thing, and that is Katara does the waterbending bomb and gets Sokka's map wet. And he got this map from Wan Chi Tong's library, and he mentions in dialogue, this is a 5,000-year-old map, and as we get a brief look at the map, we see that, okay, the Ba Sing Se is there on the map, and it has the walls up. So it allows us to at least place Ba Sing Se and how long it's been there in the timeline as at least 5,000 years. And given that the whole Earth King, we know about the Earth King is that like King Kwai is the 52nd Earth King. It allows you to, you know, be like, okay, you know, you can sort of play with the idea of like, okay, the 5,000 years, 52 kings, you know, that's not, you know, too crazy to think about. It's a little bit off, but you know, you get the idea that, you know, there's the king obviously, you know, is not implied to have always been in place. So the walls kind of happened before the king is kind of the implication. But still, very interesting implications that Ba Sing Se is very old. Because the walls came up after what the city originally was. And the city was originally like an underground city. Hence the catacombs that we see in the Ba Sing Se episodes. So there's a lot of history to Ba Sing Se. We don't know a ton of it, but it's interesting that it puts like original Ba Sing Se as being the underground caverns as being well over 5,000 years old. So that's very interesting. But yeah, the core on this side of the episode is obviously that Aang, after the desert, you kind of would think like, okay, he's finally letting his emotions out about how he actually feels about the loss of Appa, to kind of transform from anger into actually just, you know, just being upset at the loss of Appa. And here, instead, what they do is they go down this very interesting angle of he's holding back his emotions, whereas, you know, you had that very emotional moment at the end of the desert, and here he's holding back, and Katara's kind of not really happy to see him doing this, because I think she understands how he feels, and is kind of shocked that he's really kind of forcing to not feel and trying to ignore any mention of Appa. And it comes across like he doesn't care anymore, when in fact the reveal is actually later on, it's that he's afraid of going into the Avatar state, that if he feels that if he's overly open with his emotions and how he feels about this situation, the Avatar state could activate again, and that's been a plot point for this entire book, is Aang being afraid of how he is and what he does in the Avatar state when he doesn't have control, and he wants to avoid that if possible, to kind of help the other people around him, because they don't like it and he knows they don't like it, and he himself is not a fan of it either. But they do an interesting thing here in that they have the group accompany basically these other refugees from the Earth Kingdom, Hope, Thawne, Ying, and also Thawne's sister, as refugees to Ba Sing Se. They're going to get the ferry, because they mentioned at the start, oh, we'll just take the Serpents Pass, that's the quickest way to get there. And they alert them to the fact that, no, that's a really, really, really dangerous kind of way to go there. No one does that because it's so dangerous. We'll take the ferry at Full Moon Bay, and we kind of progress from there. But obviously these characters, Thawne and Ying, are the couple that Zuko was initially going to rob in an earlier episode, but then chose not to. So it's really interesting to follow. You can sort of follow their path as well as they're fleeing from somewhere to get to Ba Sing Se. So that's interesting. We also, when we get to the kind of the ferry kind of port, we see the cabbage merchant, and also we see some platypus bears, which are acting as security, destroying anything. And of course, you know, they're very protective of Ba Sing Se, so infected cabbages is not something they need, so they get the platypus bear to kind of destroy them. And you know, you get some really fun actually moments here at the port, as obviously our team doesn't have passports because Aang's an air nomad from all this time ago. The Southern Water Tribe, I don't think, has that sort of infrastructure, so they're not used. They just wouldn't have passports, full stop. And Toph ends up being the one who comes to save them here, in that she just basically puts her, like, you know, the family seal basically up on the desk, and it's just like, you know, I'm a Bei Fong, these people are with me, give me the tickets. And it's they basically bow before Toph. That's how well respected her family is, and she gets them the tickets. But the big thing that happens is, of course, that Ying and Thawne are robbed, and they lose their passports and they can't get tickets. So that causes the group to kind of the Great Divide style abandon their easier plans to get to a place to help another group of people get through a specific location. And I suppose in a way you could say that this episode is the Great Divide done really, really well as an episode. So that's an interesting comparison point to make. You also get that fun moment of, like, Aang saying, you know, like, I don't bring up this card, I'm the Avatar, but she's just like, yeah, you're like the 7th Avatar I've seen today, and people are obviously trying to use Aang's appearance to kind of get free stuff as the Avatar. But yeah, the reveals just kind of keep coming here, as, like, we meet up with Suki again, and here she is without the makeup. Sokka doesn't initially recognize her, but we instantly see that relationship kind of switch back on. So it's a lot of kind of stuff happening, and you know, like, there's so much to this episode. Like, you almost feel like they could have introduced Suki at a different time, but she's such a cool and interesting character that, like, she's always a great addition to any episode. And she goes with them. You know, that's an interesting one. She eventually puts on her Kyoshi Warrior outfit, goes with them. She has, you know, earlier on she does ask Aang how he's feeling when she finds out what happened to Appa. But the dynamic with Sokka and Suki you get here is that obviously they very clearly both like each other. This is a relationship that is going to happen very clearly. But Sokka's being overly protective of her, and they shoot this really well in that they make a lot of mentions without really alluding, like, without actually just really directly saying it, showing the moon a lot and having him kind of refer to, you know, there's someone I wasn't able to protect, and that being this kind of, like, the one thing stopping the two of them from just being a couple is Sokka being unable to protect her, to protect Yue, and then him kind of feeling like, is it okay to kind of move on from that relationship and just, you know, get together with Suki. So very interesting stuff here, but it all works out well in the end. When they arrive at the Serpents Pass, they have the whole idea of, like, the sign there says, you know, abandon hope. And Aang is at the stage now where he more or less agrees that he's being very practical. Like, hope isn't going to get us through here. Hope's not going to get Appa back. And Katara is very concerned and is basically just kind of, like, really kind of almost like seriously like telling Aang, like, don't abandon hope, don't kind of lose this. Suki mentions, there's a big project on the other side of the pass, which is clearly referring, I think, to the drill, just to set up the next episode, and that it is a two-parter, more or less. It's an interesting one in that it's not directly just called, like, part 1, part 2, but, like, on the DVDs, the UK DVDs, it is referred to on the discs as being a part 1 and 2. But I think the UK sets, the USA sets, I don't think they really kind of, like, are as heavy on the whole, like, there are two-parter thing. But that's just a interesting kind of side note. It's at this point that we get the scene of Aang kind of explaining to Katara. They have that scene together. He explains that, like, he's doing this basically because of kind of the fear of kind of what happens if he kind of lets himself kind of just be very open with his feelings. We do also, I suppose, get the kind of equivalent scene with Sokka and Suki, where Suki just kind of confronts Sokka about it, that, like, I can look after myself, and he kind of ends up kind of coming out and saying, that he is protective because he lost someone, and Suki then brings up the idea of, like, she lost someone, and it's clearly the whole time we're aware talking about Sokka, but he's not copping onto it, and she eventually just says it, I'm talking about you, she's being, like, really, really clear that she likes him. And, he obviously likes her as well, but the way they do it, the moon right there in between them, they go for the kiss, he stops it, in part because he's thinking about Yue and because the moon is right there. It's just it's a really interesting kind of symbolic thing that they do here. After that, you get the big action scene. It's a very well done action scene. Like, Toph kind of becomes somewhat of a focus in this section, as she kind of saves people with her earthbending as they cross the pass. When they go underwater, when the bubble underwater is kind of burst, she brings them all up to make a little mini island in the middle of the submerged section. And then, like, the big moment is that, like, everyone gets across on an ice bridge that Katara makes, but Toph, of course, can't see on ice, so she struggles to get across, and you get that really funny moment of she falls in the water, she can't swim, Sokka prepares to go in to save her, Suki jumps in first, but Toph thinks it's Suki Toph thinks it's Sokka who saved her, but it's actually Suki. She basically reveals that Toph has a crush on Sokka and kisses him on the cheek, but she realizes she's kissed Suki on the cheek, and you get the whole, okay, you can let me drown now moment of just like, yep, Toph's being really expressive for once, and she's punished for it, of course, but just an interesting dynamic that they set up, that, like, oh, Toph actually has a little crush on Sokka, and it becomes like a ship because of this moment, basically. But interesting that they set that up in the same episode where they more or less completely put Sokka and Suki together as a couple. So you get a lot of those kind of cool moments. Aang and Katara doing some awesome waterbending together to defeat the Serpent. Katara is awesome with the waterbending in this episode, and then the two of them make a whirlpool, and they basically just put the Serpent in the whirlpool, and then it smashes its head off the pass to kind of, like, defeat it in the end. So pretty cool. They get across, of course, and the big thing that happens, of course, pregnant character, of course she gives birth at this point in time, and Katara knows exactly how to handle this. She's used to it. She helped Gran back in the tribe with the women who gave birth, and she immediately orders everyone to get water, blah blah blah. And they use the birth of Hope here as the kind of key moment for Aang in terms of kind of snapping him out of the emotional kind of state he was in, and kind of realizing that hope is very important even in these kind of bad times. And his little speech there inspires the couple, of course, to call their child Hope, and it's this really kind of nice moment. And you get Aang basically to Katara, like, really thanking her for, like, basically, like, you got me through all of this, and this whole situation made me realize how I feel about Appa, and the key moment, how I feel about you. Like, it's actually a very important relationship episode, this one, with what they set up here with, obviously, this being a quite emotional moment in terms of really showing the connection between Aang and Katara and how they kind of their dynamic ends up working out. Sokka and Suki, of course, at the end coming together. She reveals that she has to leave. She can't go with the group, and Sokka's the one, of course, to come in and give the kiss this time round. Smooth move, of course, from Sokka. But just solid with that couple, and it's to the point, of course, where like everyone in the comic fandom is just begging them to at some point cover this relationship a little bit more. That it's one of the more underdeveloped relationships, just because in the comics right now they've had so little time together, and it's a relationship that people care about. Suki's a character people really, really care about, but they don't really seem to be positioning her where people want her. So, some weird stuff right now with Suki, but she is an important member of the group. She is a member of Team Avatar come the end of the show. So there's that. And then on the other side of the episode, we have Iroh and Zuko, of course. They're a little bit ahead of where like Team Avatar is. They're already on the ferry to Ba Sing Se. And the unique thing that they do here is that Zuko meets Jet and some of the other freedom fighters, Smellerbee and Longshot. Very kind of oddly fitting. Like I think it's this episode where like you never make the connection before they actually introduce Jet that like, wait, this is actually a really interesting character for Zuko to meet. Someone who kind of is a similar age, kind of lost his way because of how he felt with the Fire Nation. What's going on here in that Jet is not aware that Zuko's from the Fire Nation. So if that ever comes out, it's going to immediately change like this potential that Jet seems to see in Zuko here. In that very clearly, like, Jet kind of wants Zuko on his team. That's what he's kind of doing. He's kind of forming up the freedom fighters again, because obviously he doesn't have like everyone with him. Like Pipsqueak the Duke aren't there, Sneers isn't there, and so on. So he has the people who are loyal to him, and he feels that like Zuko could be someone to add to the team, because the big thing that happens is just that they kind of work together to steal food from the captain, who's having all the good food while all the passengers are eating this awful stuff, and they just like basically steal from the rich, give to the poor, and it's they're kind of helping out together, being freedom fighters basically. And we more or less get that at the end as they kind of both talk about how in front of Iroh as well, you have Iroh dealing with the fact that for him it's this like odd moment of just like this important moment in his life. He's going back to Ba Sing Se, which is like where his biggest military failure happened and where a lot of very, I suppose, tragic moments in his life happened, but important moments in his life. So it's an important place to him, and so he kind of doesn't really know how to feel about returning there again, but he's kind of happy to be returned there as like a refugee tourist this time. So unique from Iroh's perspective, as he kind of even notes when like Jet says that he did some bad stuff in the past and is trying to kind of change things with this new chance at life. And in a way, Iroh hopes that Zuko can have the same approach with them going to live in Ba Sing Se now, and Zuko and Jet kind of to some degree bond and kind of connect over having similar paths of like making wrong decisions, and this being a new chance for them. And Zuko, the key line here that shows development from Zuko is that he says, like, I now realized that like being on my own is not the best path, and having Iroh with him is actually something that's been very helpful for him, that he's maybe taken for granted before this point, but that's that. But that's basically the episode review. Really, really good episode. I don't think it quite has like the emotional heights of like the desert, but it comes very close just because it has so much stuff, little things that happen here and there. Suki comes back into play. We get like little moments like the cabbage merchant, Longshot, and even Smellerbee gets a moment here of just like Iroh mistaking her for a boy, and it's clearly being like a kind of confidence thing, and like this tends to happen a lot with her, so it kind of messes up her confidence when it happens. And Longshot, without actually saying anything to her, kind of gives her that confidence back, because a lot of people ship the two of them together. I'd probably be with them on that, and that it seems like for two characters we don't get a ton of focus on. There's a little bit more in the comics. I think this is a relationship that makes a decent amount of sense. Not that I think we'll ever really get too much focus or confirmation on it, but it's a nice one to bring together. And then, yeah, a surprising amount of just romance stuff in this episode. Like, even though I would never really say the Aang Katara stuff here is overly romantic, it at least kind of shows that the two of them have this very kind of deep connection, and I think a little bit of romance just with what Aang says, you know, it makes me realize how I feel about you. It's just like this kind of surprising like admission that they don't really like linger on right here all that much, because I think Katara is just happy that Aang's kind of expressing himself more again. But yeah, that's the episode review. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.